Hello, everyone, and belated Happy New Year. Welcome to the first event for the Information Systems Security Association Los Angeles chapter. I'm Mark Smith, Program Director. We have a special event scheduled for you today. Appreciate everyone joining. A little about ISSA. We're the founding chapter of ISSA International, which was actually founded by two women. Part of our mission, obviously, is to promote women in cybersecurity, which is an important part of how we operate. As well, the goal of ISSA is to promote management practices that ensure CIA, the kind we're talking about, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Should give a shout out to our crew and our board of directors and advisors, which are all volunteers. Volunteering copious amounts of time. We really appreciate it and doing a fantastic job promoting training and for our annual summit. Obviously, we've gone virtual, taking advantage of some of the telemetry there in terms of guest speakers and so forth, given the distance and things, but hoping we can get back to normal sooner than later. Saying everybody stay safe as well. In terms of the board, a special note to Mike Lehman, who is our education director, who put this session together, and with Vectra people as well, and Josh Chen, who's our technology director, doing a fantastic job on the back end. So really appreciate that. In terms of where to find us, you can visit our website, ISSA-LA.org. And if you register there, you'll get relevant emails providing you with upcoming events. Don't worry, you won't get spammed to death. We're pretty good about it, but it's a good way to maintain your network and stay connected. Additionally, you can find us on most platforms: Eventbrite, Meetup, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, we're there. So a good way to stay connected and to see what's happening and so forth. So that's a bit about us. To the meeting at hand. Today's webinar is Analyzing the Attack Lifecycle in the Cloud, sponsored by Vectra AI, presented by Geoff Korrub, who's a security solution architect with a master's degree in technology commercialization, having a background in leading transformational IT security-centric initiatives. This will be the first in a series of educational events with ISSA, sponsored by Vectra AI. In the upcoming months, there'll be a red team workshop, which will be followed by a blue team workshop, both of which will be about 3.5 hours with 3.5 CPE credits available to participants. I should mention today's session has 1 CPE credit available. And details on those workshops to follow. Also, a bit of housekeeping here. Next week, we'll have the regular ISSA meeting on January 13th with our law enforcement panel at the same time, 11:45 to 1 p.m. Thank you for giving up your lunch hour, and we appreciate it. We've assembled a great panel of law enforcement personnel for this event, with participants from agencies such as the FBI, U.S. Secret Service, as they discuss the latest cybersecurity attacks and the trends that are being observed. Should be very interesting, particularly in light of the recent major breaches. This panel is incredibly important to attend. And again, you can sign up through the ISSA-LA webpage. So with that, I'm going to skedaddle here and get out of the way and hand it over to Geoff.
I'm on mute. There you go. Sorry about that. Okay, so my name is Geoff Korrub. I am with Vectra, and we will be presenting today on the Vectra Detect, the Cognito Detect platform, and how that platform helps organizations look at both the prem, but today we're going to be concentrating on how that solution helps organizations look at their O365 environments. So the solution itself is built in a model where we began with machine learning and artificial intelligence to take a look at behaviors. We're looking very much at the behaviors of network traffic and how systems were interacting with other systems. We've evolved that to look at O365 in integrating directly with the O365 by reviewing the O365 logs, the Azure AD logs, and building an O365 centric solution there as well. We've also recognized the value in having the solution work jointly, so it's offered as a suite of solution where we have what we call Detect for 365 and we have Detect for Network, and both can be run into a single interface, and that's something that we're going to kind of talk about and show today. Also, in being relevant to current events, part of what we'll be presenting today will also be very much the sunburst attack, but not just the sunburst attack, but that style and method, and where we've seen components of it before, and what that would really look like inside of a Detect 365 solution. Also, we should note that there is the QA form that is open, so please ask questions in the QA form. We will do everything we can to either answer them in real time or to come back around to those questions as they're asked. All right. First thing to understand about what we're doing with O365 is to understand that, and I think much more relevant in the last 2 weeks, people understand now, O365 is not Outlook email. Email is such a minor part of what O365 is. So what we're going to talk about here is how do we protect the suite of 365? Is it SharePoint exfiltration? Is it e-discovery and enumeration through there? Is it AD admin privileges and SAML authentication components that are under attack? All of these things are just pieces of 365. So when we look at this solution, we're looking at those pieces of 365. We then talk about kind of who we work with. We've got a laundry list of customers. I can't always go into names, obviously. We're in the type of environment where everybody wants to work with you, but nobody wants to say that they're working with you because that would compromise. If you would like to have some direct conversations with us and have some direct connections made, we can do that. This particular slide that I've got up here, actually, I'm going to just toggle straight to it. This is a reference off from Microsoft's website themselves. So this is Microsoft's site, and this is back in September, far before we saw the actual SolarWinds rise to the surface. But this really kind of talked to how Microsoft inside of Azure, Microsoft in 365, Microsoft inside of their E5 suite as a whole, Sentinel and Detect for EDR, all kind of come together. So this is a component of that. So I'm happy to leave that as a reference, but this is a component of it where we're showing it as a component of the three-legged stool. And at the same time, it's an O365 protection component. This is something that just a few weeks ago was something we had to explain to people, that account takeover is a high-risk component of having 365 environments and having them not be monitored, and what that really means to the prem environments. So I'm not really going to spend much time on this slide here. I think everybody kind of understands account takeover. What I think became much more clear is that account takeover can also mean admin account takeover, not just some user's account. Even accounts that are bound by multi-factor authentication, so we have MFA, we have legacy protocols that we can make calls to get around that MFA. One of the other ways we're seeing people get around MFA is by creating fake applications that then ask the user for permissions for something that they then perform a spear phishing attack, and all we need is one user, and now you have a persistent access for 30, 60, 90 days without MFA.
Hi. Excuse me, Mark. Sorry to interrupt there. Jeff, are you going to share your screen there?
I thought I was. Apologies for that.
All good. All good. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see if we've missed anything in particular. So I was sorry, I briefly referred to the, how we're looking at the broader environment. And then I had pointed over briefly to the Microsoft site where they are referring over to the Vectra product for securing the Microsoft and the O365 environments. Thank you for stopping me before I got too far into this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I want to talk next about kind of attacker tactics, and I want to make sure that I'm doing this in a way that's respectful of the intelligence of the individuals on this call, and not ambulance chasing a particular vulnerability. But it does help to have something that's fresh in everybody's mind to understand how the system in a whole works. And so on this, I've got a few different things here. I've got different tabs open. One of these tabs is the actual Vectra Dashboard. And what I'm going to be doing with the Vectra Dashboard is I'm actually going to show you a live system. So I had somebody say to me, good luck with live demos, but honestly, I don't want to. Anyways, we'll get to that later. But okay, so on this attacker tactics, the O365, the first thing I wanted to call out is something that's not O365. I want to call out what the Detect for Network has been watching for quite some time, years, and how the platform works as a whole underlying, and how this reframes to the framework. You can call it the kill chain framework, you can call it the MITRE attack framework, but the progression of attacks through the framework. So the first thing that the system needs to do is make a determination that something is happening. We're not looking like an EDR looks at a particular detection in that, hey, a service kicked up. We may, but that's not holistically what it is, because somebody could custom write their own. So what we're really looking for is we're watching wire data in the case of Detect for Network, and we're watching wire data for hidden tunnels, peer-to-peer networking. And if we see these types of things, we can durably connect it to command and control. You can say that's command and control. I don't really care that much. I mean, I will throw out a low-level alert if 1,000 command and control sessions or even 2 command and control sessions are set up. But really where we want to draw the attention is when command and control starts to become reconnaissance, or reconnaissance starts to become lateral. Where we see these combinations of events, that to us is when the SOC team, from an operator perspective, should really be giving it the attention. So combing through all of that wire data, building that wire data into alerts, and then building those alerts via machine learning into true behavioral detections, either on one system or correlated across multiple systems that are working in concert with each other. And we can get into what that looks like. But the most important component of it is we really need to turn these alerts into essentially a durable categorical detection that we can use in behaviors. And we took that and we were able to then take that into O365. We could take that same logic, we could take that machine learning that we'd spent years building. But instead of having a network to look at, what we have is two different things really. We have the O365 application log, and we have the Azure AD logs. And by taking those two logs and applying, again, the same types of detections, the same types of machine learning, we were able to make determinations on invalid tokens, or the ability, or a forged token being created or a spare phishing attack. And I'll show you what some of those look like, but also, is enumeration going on in an O365 account? Is enumeration going on in an O365 account that has command and control detected? So being able to take a look at those, and then at the same time, and this again is an O365 conversation, but I'm going to span it back into Detect for Network, in concert, taking that Azure AD and taking traditional AD, if you've got both products, and being able to map that back to an AD user, and potentially being able to map, not potentially, but being able to map that back to an AD user and the AD user's host. So we can correlate those events in concert from an O365 enumeration all the way to a command and control session that's happening on the host. All right, so this would be my little bit of ambulance chasing, but at the same time, this is something I think that's very current in everybody's mind, and a lot of people are asking, how could I have protected against something like this if nobody seems to have been able to catch it? And so this is this is the attack that we saw from SolarWinds. So we saw a supply chain compromise. We saw the environments go dormant temporarily, then establish some tunnels, then do some reconnaissance. Then we saw some forging of some SAML tokens and other things in order to gain persistent admin access. And then we saw exfiltration. So what I want to show here is in the Detect platform, what does this really look like? So with the full suite, the Detect for Network and the Detect for O365, this is what it would look like, and I'll step through it. And remember, these solutions can be run independently, or they can be run in parallel. And I promise I'll get to the actual interface so you can see what this looks like. So up at the very top, we're not going to see anything, right? This is either happening off our network or it's a time delay. But what we are going to be able to see is the identification of the C2 domain. Now, this is going to be an after the fact, right? It's going out right now to find a domain name to which it can tunnel back to. Nothing is really being done here yet. MITRE would call this command and control, but nothing is going to detect this. If something were to detect this, then every advert, every new app, every time somebody opened a web browser, this would trigger. But the data is there inside the data lakes of the product to go back retroactively and find these. Once that has found its target, the first thing it's going to do is set up that command and control tunnel. So this is a custom HTTPS tunnel that connects out. This is something that Detect for Network would have detected on. You would have gotten a hidden HTTPS tunnel created. You would have seen it from the SolarWinds server. And at that point, it probably would have wound up in the low field, if you had this, in the quadrant system. Chances are you would look at it as a low tunnel coming from your SolarWinds server and not to a domain that was any kind of a domain on a threat intel feed. And 50-50, you would have left it alone. 50-50, you would have triaged and whitelisted it. So you got to be careful with the actions we take in some of these. But continuing on, we saw the Cobalt Strike. Again, another second command and control tunnel. 2 command and control tunnel events, 1 machine, still in the low category for us. And so when I talk about the categories, I'm going to pivot real quick. We'll see these categories as being low, medium, high, and critical. And so we'll have hosts that will sit in these systems and in low because there's a threat intel match or something of the like. And they're going to stay there until something more happens, right? And I'll get into what that looks like later, but I want to stay to this. The reconnaissance would have begun. Had we left the command and control tunnels untriaged, we would have seen reconnaissance. It would have then moved to medium or high. Somebody would have looked at it and said, it's our SolarWinds server. Unknown whether they would have performed action, but there's suspicious LDAP queries and RPC reconnaissance now coming from the SolarWinds server along with the hidden HTTPS tunnel. Then the lateral movement begins. We see service or admin account presentations. We see domain credentials. Again, this would have moved it to high or critical in the quadrant system. Whether or not it would have been addressed because it's a trusted server in the eyes of the humans that watch it is unclear. The next pieces are very telling though. These are the O365 components. So you can see these as independent tools, but you can also see them as unified tools, depending on how you are implementing the suite. If you had just the O365, your first detection would have been for the admin Azure access. We would have alerted on these suspicious sign-ons, and these suspicious sign-ons would have come through as the forged SAML tokens that were used to secure the Azure AD access. We also would have alerted on suspicious Azure AD operations. Persistent access to the Azure AD was gained through those. And then also we had the modified credentials for OAuth, and so the redundant creation. So we would have seen these alerts, and then exfiltration is exfiltration. So these are all the different components of the attack. And so even if you had absolutely whitelisted your SolarWinds system, you would have seen these suspicious logins and you would have seen these access components to these accounts that remain persistent. Now, I'm going to blow that up so you can see it a little bit better, but these are the O365 specific components here for this attack. What's important, SolarWinds and the Sunburst attack has been put to bed. People have built now static scripts that you can simply run. It will check your environment. It looks for these specifics. It will tell you whether or not you're infected. Virtually every firewall vendor out there is helping people take a quick look at their firewall logs and telling them whether or not there's been yes or no. But what's not happening is a protection against this type of attack moving forward. None of these techniques, believe it or not, are new. We saw these attacks inside of App33, where we saw credentials. We saw these inside of the phishing components of them to gain admin access with forged tokens. So these are the types of things that we're seeing inside of many of these attacks, where people are gaining persistent admin access to the 365 environment. And because Azure AD and AD on the prem are connected, they're using that to come back into the prem environment, even if it's been cleaned. All right, so I'm going to pause here on the PowerPoint to death stuff and kind of pivot in a little bit to the actual interface. So on our interface, what we have is we have these vectors of threat and of certainty. And so when we look at threat, what we're doing is we're using machine learning to make the determinations. How threatening is the behavior we believe that we are seeing? And certainty is how certain are we that that is the behavior that we're seeing? And we say behaviors because we're not looking at an individual attack mostly. Sometimes we'll have an individual attack. And you'll see here threat and certainty score does not match the machine's threat and certainty score. When we move into the criticals, we start to see combination events. I see hidden tunnels with suspicious remote execution, with reconnaissance. And so what we're seeing here is a very high threat and certainty. And when we come into the system, we're seeing against the attack cycle we talked about being a durable detection, command control, reconnaissance, lateral, progressing through a behavior. That's really what we care about very much here. When we take a look at the accounts, I'm going to come back to the accounts. So we have three things that we're really watching, but two of them are kind of one and the same. We have hosts, we have AD accounts, and we have O365 accounts. Unfortunately, we're able to tie the O365 accounts to the AD accounts, and we're actually able to connect the AD accounts to the hosts that they have record of logging into. So we're able to make those connections. And when we do that, we wind up with things like this kind of a detection. So this is Blake. Blake has 4 detections: command and control, reconnaissance, and lateral. 3 of these detections are O365 detections. The command and control detection is a suspicious sign-on, and we'll see that. Here's the details. It's coming from China. It's a rare IP address. Then we see the reconnaissance begin. We see unusual e-discovery searches. So this is a user looking for information. It could be anything from transactions. We've seen where they search for DocuShares, DocuSigns rather. We'll see where they should look for admin credentials, but they'll do the e-discovery through the O365 e-discovery tool that's available to them. So when we see these things, we know that this is really critical. And then we'll see the lateral movement. He's brute force onto other accounts in the system. So we see 23 login attempts, brute force. What we also see is a privileged anomaly unusual service. And it's really important here to understand this. This particular attack, an unusual service, is an unusual service running on a host. So we were able to pivot from this O365 detection through the user to his AD user and into the host themselves. Now, it may be that either you only have O365 or everything is BYOD and you literally don't have a corporate AD, which is incredibly rare, but assuming it is. So this may or may not be, but we have this privileged anomaly unusual service. And so what we're able to see here on his MacBook Pro is that we're seeing privileged anomaly unusual service. And what this means for us is that this user, this is his machine, he uses this all the time, but he doesn't usually run this service. It's really rare. And also this service doesn't really belong on this machine. Historically, this is what we've seen. And so here we have some intelligence, right? This isn't a user running a rare service on a rare machine, it's also a user running all of that while his machine has command and control from remote external access or potentially been compromised through O365. And then we see other things. File share enumeration in particular might be a little worrisome. And I can see the accounts that are being used to do the enumeration and the files that are being enumerated. So all of this information is all wire data for our network. There's no EDR component to this. It's all just wire data. From O365, it is just read access to O365 app log and Azure AD so that we can correlate those. And again, the tools can be run independently. Traditionally, a lot of our customers in the last 30 days have asked how fast they could get turned up with O365 and just O365. And we offer that in a private spun instance where we create a private EC2 instance. Your information goes to there. You get the logins. We whitelist very specific IP addresses for it. And we can turn that service up in far less than an hour from beginning to end. So rather than kind of run around guessing at what's been valuable, I'm going to kind of turn this back over and take a look through any questions that may be coming up. There you go, Mark, here.
Alrighty. In terms of questions, I think you pretty much hit on the one that I saw come in, which was around solar winds and kind of elaborate there. Anything else to say?
So yeah, I don't want to be an ambulance chaser about it. So I kind of went through the most important thing, and we have a really nice white paper on it. We can send out as part of this for a follow-up. But the most important things to understand is that the attack vectors in 365, while they are different, they can be made durable the same way we look at the framework for network. The machine learning components can be applied the same way. And they can be made durable so that they can show. And then at that point, it's not about protecting against a past event with a static filter. It's about understanding that these behaviors are present and that they're possible. They didn't forge the SAML tokens and the OAuth tokens because they were a super advanced attack. They got into where they got into because they were a super advanced attack. But anyone compromising your prem environment will immediately try to lateral over to your 365 environment because they can hide there in perpetuity once they perform these. The golden ticket attack from SAML has been out for 18 months. It's not a new attack. And it's part of how some systems operate. It's not something that's going away.
Yeah, got it. So many people just are lulled into complacency thinking they have MFA and they're set.
I think it's two things. I think it's that, and I also believe that people treat it as if it's a SaaS application, right? They've had SaaS applications in their environment for a significant amount of time. This is nothing new to them. It's just Microsoft Word out there in the cloud instead of being on my servers. What those SaaS applications, I don't care if it's Salesforce that you're integrating with that's super core to your business, is that they're not bidirectionally communicating with Active Directory. You can't go on Salesforce, make a modification, or gain an admin account access through there. I mean, this is Azure AD to Microsoft AD. There is a level of interconnect there that you don't see in SaaS applications. And I think people miss that at times. And so they treat it like they've treated historically their SaaS applications. Oh yeah, we've got OneDrive and we've put all critical files up there for a long time, but they forget that there's that AD component to it.
Exactly. It's so dynamic, you know, other than people watching the critical updates that come across email and so forth, any suggestions to the community at large about how to stay current and make sure they're mindful of any changes?
As far as, so can you elaborate a little more on that question?
Well, the O365 platform is ever evolving, AD, Azure,
Yep.
right? And there's all these yes buts, right? You're good until you're not.
Yes, yes, exactly. So what we're looking to do is the same thing we did for network, right? A new software application, a new hardware appliance comes out every quarter for an organization traditionally. And relearning what's okay and not okay on a per application basis, building static filters and application identifier headers, and that is not a practical way to move forward. What you really need to be doing is watching accounts for activities that don't belong, and then to see if other activities that also don't belong are happening. Sure, there are going to be new things. For example, we can detect external access from Microsoft Teams. 3 years ago, Microsoft Teams didn't exist, right? So that's new. Power Automate as a shell component inside of O365 for execution of script engines. These are things that emerge, and when they emerge, they become a threat vector. And so we are going to analyze them into that durable framework, right? So what is a Power Automate script that is copying your data off the network? That's exfiltration. It might be a brand new tool, but it fits very cleanly into a piece of the framework. And so that's the really important thing. That's why we avoid the need to do decrypt. So this entire product works 100% with decrypt. Right? There's no decryption in the product whatsoever. Everything is wire data. Even our secure tunnel-in-tunnel is done through metronomics and machine learning algorithms. We do not look at the bits and bytes specifically. We look at their intervals. We look at their synchronicity. We look at their volumes. We look at their and because of that, we're able to do things without decrypting. And because of that, we're confident that 18 months from now, this will still be a valid product. We don't have to hope that nobody creates a SSL version that we can't man in the middle, and all of a sudden we can't do detections. We don't have to hope that somebody creates a new application and we can build it into our framework. File share enumeration is file share enumeration. I don't care if the tool gets built tomorrow for the first time.
Gotcha. A couple questions came in. We lumped together a couple, and you can field it as you want there. One was saying, how does Vectra compare to Stealth Bits and a competitor or complementary? The other one is, if so, what practice? There's another question. I'm not sure how they tied it together. Yeah, that was one question. How does Vectra compare to Stealth Bits, a competitor or complementary? And we can hit the next one when you're ready.
So my understanding of Stealth Bits is it's a little more compliance based. So what we're really looking to try to do is there's the whole protection of and worrying about where things are at the time that they're at, and the auditing sense of the world, the monitoring sense of the world. So the real broad differentiator in the product, in what Vectra is doing, is we're not going to look at logs and hope that they found them unless they're the only way, which in the O365 case is what it is. But what we're really going to do is we're going to look at these threat vectors as they're coming in, and we're going to look at them across the environments. So that's one of the biggest differentiators of the product is being able to take that machine learning that we've spent a significant amount of time building, years, I think we're like 8 years into some of these, and apply them both to the 365 environment as well as the prem environment, either independently or preferably jointly, to alert people in real time as to what's going on. We're not an auditing tool, right? We're not, if you're getting down into that auditing level, that's not really our space. It's not what we do. An auditor tool will scan a bunch of servers and see what's going on. We're going to actually look at the data that's actually going on. So an auditing tool might do something like scan to see if SMB v1 is enabled anywhere. The Vectra tooling is going to watch the network and tell you if there's been an SMB transmission to a system. And it will tell you that SMB transmission happened at the same time as X, Y, and Z events, and whether or not that's worth your attention. And so that's some of the bigger things. All right. I'm starting to see the questions come in. Okay, can Vectra take automated action or does it only inform? This is a really great question. Vectra has been designed initially to only inform. There is a tremendous value in having one place to run your SOAR engine from, right? How many places do you want to scatter your playbooks between? At the same time, there are some very basic things that may require attention immediately, and we don't have time for that. So we have some functions for account lockout, and we generally will trigger on those when we see things like ransomware. So when you looked at that framework attack, you saw kind of a circle, and we started that circle, and I'm going to do a quick reshare here. So when we see that attack phases circle, we see the command and control reconnaissance are kind of going this way. On the other direction, we have this botnet. And so what this botnet really is a lot of things like we'll see cryptocurrency mining, but we'll also see ransomware attacks. Ransomware attacks doesn't take reconnaissance and lateral. If you want to make it impactful, it does. But if you just want to land on a user's machine and start encrypting the files, we'll pick up the command and control, and then we'll start to see crypto services beginning to be run, and we'll see that through privileged anomaly unusual service. And what we can do at that point is immediately lock the account out. So I'll pop into one of these attacks, and we'll have the ability to do account lockout with these. And so that is an automated function that we can do against Active Directory. So you can see that these attacks, and why I did that, is tied to a user's account. So we have these accounts here. And some of them have significant things going on, and some of them have less significant things going on. Privileged anomaly, unusual account on the host, right? So we're able to track this by host. And with this, we can set up an automated action of locking the user AD account for a period of time anywhere between 1 hour and 24 hours. And so that gives us the time for somebody to go back and do playbook execution without waiting for all of their files to be encrypted while help desk got around to it, if you will. Okay, I'll stop that share and go back to sharing the questions out. What practical automated preventative measures can be taken? So again, with the playbook engines, what we can do is we can use our tag mechanisms and other things to essentially alert your playbook engine, call it XOR, call it Phantom, to then essentially categorize it into something. Hey, we have this unknown hidden HTTPS tunnel going on. I know it's low, but whatever that runtime engine playbook is, deal with, and that may have an automated action. The automated action might be to add a entry into, say, an external dynamic list for Palo Alto, and begin immediately blocking that endpoint tunnel address, right? Stops it right there. It might be to, we do have API integrations with CrowdStrike. We have API integrations with Windows Defender to send an alert by API to trigger host isolation in the EDR client, right? So there's a number of actions, but what we don't want to do is become a whole second point of playbook engine. What does Vectra cost? I have no idea. I'm an engineer. That's not for me. Somebody on this call can answer that, but it will probably be taken for later. I do know that our O365 is charged on a per user per month. So what we do is, as we're pulling through the logs, we will get an accurate count of your active users, and it's a per user per month. There are no clients for this. It's the next question. There are no clients. This is a 100% client-free solution. We watch only the wire data by either span or tap, or in the case of O365, read access to the log files. we recognize that there are significant shortcomings with EDR clients, as the first thing an attacker will tend to do is flip them off.
Very interesting. Maybe you covered it already, but how long has this product been out? And in terms of, and we're not going to sign an NDA with 50 people on the line here, but whatever you can tell us about the evolution.
The evolution. So by the product, we're talking the O365. Well, so the Vectra product's been out for about 8 years now. So Vectra's been around, but the O365 product was launched last year. The first of my customers, personally, as an SE here, turned up about a year ago now, kind of first quarter, second quarter. They were the alphas. The product was really kind of in full ship Q3 and Q4. We've been adding features and adding features and adding features. So we're very much a startup running at startup speed. So features are being added very quickly to the product and the platform.
Excellent. Well, we've got a fair bit of time left. Is there anything else, Geoff, that you wanted to delve in perhaps a bit more deeply, or?
I mean, I don't want to run around in a circle for everybody. So, I mean, if you guys want to see something specific, just type it into the chat. I'm happy to take you on a drive-through of more of the system. But for the most part, the system was designed to be very simple to operate and very simple, mostly to understand where to spend your time, right? So we wanted to tell you, this is important. You need to pay attention to it now. And so building something complex doesn't help you get there. We do have the backend engines that hold all the metadata that we're running the detections against. And we have those right now through an elk stack. So you can, if you're familiar with a Kibana interface, you can tear through that metadata on your own. We can ship that metadata off our site into Splunk, where in the Splunk marketplace, we have dashboards. So that way you can do your alerting straight from Splunk. But the real thing is, to get meaningful information out of the system should not be complicated. It should not be cumbersome. It should be a limited number of things, and all of them should be important. And at the same time, you shouldn't miss anything.
Yeah, well said. Well said. I'm trying to frame the last question in terms of the main takeaways people should leave this meeting with. Is there any? Yeah,
I would say the biggest eye-opener that Sunburst has brought to my customers is that Azure AD and its connection to your environment makes it the kind of place that is not only vulnerable due to some of these forged tokens or OAuth provider capabilities. And so it's a place that an attacker can go and hide until you've put your guard down, because you can't afford to run a remediation audit on your environment every 2 weeks. And even if you did, you'd probably, on average, right, miss an entire week of their access at admin level. So what we really want to do is we want to make sure that people understand the eye-opener of the last couple of weeks is you've basically given your AD to Microsoft in the cloud when you've enabled 365, regardless of whether you have one user on there or 100,000. It doesn't matter. That connector is there, that admin level access is there, and it's an absolute pivot point for someone to go, get caught, you remediate your whole internal prem, or you remediate your O365 through a different tooling of some type. And then they just pivot right back in, right? So being able to watch and look at both of these and really understand that this isn't just another SaaS tool that has some type of a OAuth integration for authentication for SAML, right? So, hey, SAML will use your work ID to get access to. This is very different, right? The ADs are very much tied. We're starting to get some new questions. Is there a preferred SIM vendor you integrate with? I'm going to answer this in two pieces. First, I'm going to say no. We integrate with lots of SIM tools. We have very strong partnerships with two, however. We have a very strong partnership with Splunk in that we have dashboards written inside the marketplace. We have very strong integration with Microsoft for Sentinel, in that we're doing some joint development there on the platform as a whole. So there are others. We have a product out called Recall, which is a hosted data lake. So it can act as a SIM for the Vectra metadata, and we can spin it for you as a SaaS application. So you just get a URL to pivot to. And there's no need to pin up a data lake and figure out how Elk Stack works, or we're in the middle of migrating to a next platform after that. But if you know Kibana, you can navigate it. You've got that historical data for whatever you need it for. It's isolated, it's vector data. But if you want it in a traditional SIM like a Microsoft or a Splunk, I can tell you Splunk has discounted pricing for Vectra metadata. So there are options there. What size organizations can make effective use of the product? The truth is all, right? There's no organization that that really wouldn't benefit from knowing if they were under attack, if you will. But Vectra does see a lot of traction in, if you will, the bigger the better. Hundreds of thousands of IPs under management, people trying to understand what's inside of those environments, but also enterprise environments of significant sizes all benefit. So I've seen customers with just a few hundred IPs. I've seen customers with hundreds of thousands of IPs. So we kind of run the gamut. The machine learning is the machine learning. An attacker is going to perform the same behaviors, whether it's on 10 systems or 10,000 systems. They just might find more or less valuable information. That said, it is kind of difficult to scale this thing down to, say, 10 or 20 or 30 users, right? So.
Well said. And just a follow-up question on the APIs. Are those listed on publicly on the site or something for people to check out?
Yes, so we have a list of APIs that we're developing against, but it's significant. It should be available on our website, but we can always have a direct conversation if you don't see something that you are looking for. So, for example, I had one. I won't mention the vendor. It was a particular firewall vendor, and we were asked if we integrated with their API. We didn't see it on our page. We went to them only to find out they didn't have an API for that particular implementation. So there might be a really good answer for why we don't have it. We've had others where we didn't have it and we created it. So we are very much in that kind of a startup mode where if it's what you need and you want to invest in us, we'll invest in you.
Gotcha. There's one other comment that's kind of complimentary, I guess, from Brad, saying that Gartner states that NDR should now be foundational ahead of all other post-event solutions. So just
yeah, so it's interesting. We got that triad, if you will, the SIM, the EDR endpoint, and you've got the NDR, which used to be called something else entirely. The NDR is a fairly new category as naming goes for about the last year. So we've been doing it for 8 years now, and the category itself has existed for 1, right? So we kind of picked this up super early, and it was kind of said, you need a SIM, and then you also need this NDR, and you need this EDR. They're kind of all equally important. And what's becoming is that things like a SIM from a security perspective are becoming legacy information to figure out what else was compromised after the fact. EDR is relevant to a point because it can be so easily disabled or bypassed. But at the same time, it is relevant and needed so that you could isolate a machine after a detection has been made or for supplemental information in a forensic. The NDR is the tool that can watch the highways, if you will, or in the cloud instance, the cloud components. And it's the one that's really going to provide you that meaningful, immediate action. Sure, it's also going to feed the SIM for historicals. It might feed action on the EDR, might feed the SOAR for action. So again, these are all important pieces. But what's becoming more and more obvious is that the NDR is the important first part because it's now the engine in the car. You still need a carburetor, Yeah. You still need gas tank, well, batteries, something. Sure. But the motors are the motors, right? And you're going to need that. So probably figure out which motor, that's what Gartner's trying to say. Figure out which motor you want to put in the car first, and then we'll size the tires and we'll size the catalytic converter. And right, what's happened with sim is that people will pick out a sim and they'll say, okay, that's my most expensive part, which is how that wound up being the most important, is the most expensive part. And now I'm going to find tools and make sure they feed compatibly into my sim. And that doesn't really help anybody.
Interesting. As we touched on this being such a dynamic area before, and they're not always going to have your email address and be able to pull up a session like this, right? How do you suggest that people stay current with the offering and the topics?
So we have a newsletter, right? So we put that out. We have some marketing presentations and things like that we put out on a regular basis. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, so you'll see that kind of stuff as well if you connect with me on LinkedIn. But no one also wants to be inundated with 100 emails that isn't really relevant to them. So my sarcastic advice is, if you buy the product, we'll tell you all about the new stuff all the time. But
anything on YouTube, anything?
Yeah, so we've got videos. Vectra has a marketing channel you can subscribe to. So I think as a follow-up to this, we'll send an email to everybody that basically kind of shows different ways you can stay connected and updated with us.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll be, with your permission, we'll be posting the deck, etc.
Right. So I got one last one. Is ExtraHop a competitor in this space? So the answer is sort of. They have a offering that they've taken their network product and they have built an offering that then looks at security. It doesn't work as well as the Vectra product, but again, I'm not an unbiased third party here as far as the network side of it goes. But when it comes to the O365 component, which is what we were really centering around today, there is no competitive offering from an ExtraHop or anything like that. They have very much pivoted, and this is, I think, what another big takeaway. They have pivoted from the network to the network security, which kind of makes a lot of sense. We've pivoted from machine learning for events and detections. We started on the network, and we pivoted that into the cloud. And that's something that's going to be very difficult to go from network monitoring NPM to I'm going to watch your 365 events through machine learning. It was not difficult for us. And tying the AD to the Azure AD. So these were components because of the way we watch the accounts and we look for privileged account usage and we build that into our behaviors that really, if you asked me a year ago, I probably would have said, we've got some significant overlap in the offering. But today, we're seeing all of the value and direction in 365, and there just isn't a development there from them. And it's kind of really, really outside their expertise.
Makes sense, okay. Got time for a few more questions if anybody wants to offer anything up here before we wrap. But it's been super interesting so far, really, really compelling subject. Thank you so much for the insight. And I will subscribe to that newsletter, and I'm confident you won't spam us. And I'm looking forward to staying current. I think this is really awesome. I'm going to geek out here, but.
Well, I mean, some of the nice stuff about the O365 is because all we're doing is setting up a custom application to request read permission. The setup time is less than 10 minutes for the customer. All they really have to do is they get an email and they just hit accept. It's literally all there is. There's no other setup beyond that. We spin a private instance in our EC2 that ingresses that. Go ahead and laugh at me, right? Where our brain runs in AWS against Azure, where Microsoft's our key partner. We're working on it. We're working on it. But we eat the cost of that. We ingress it all, and it's not to the customer. So what we're able to do is we're able to turn up POVs, proof of value, on the system where users can see their own environments for a month. We're doing, and and with no commitment of any kind. And we have people using this as assessments and audits of their own environments, in hopes that they'll keep the tool in perpetuity because they see value in it. But really, it's super easy to turn up to the point that anybody can do it in less than an hour, because we just send an email to the O365 admin, and all they have to do is hit accept. My record is 4 minutes, and that environment had 38,000 users. So when I say it doesn't take any time, I really mean it.
Interesting. And in terms of system updates periodically, is that all done on the back end and just
it's all done on the back end? Yeah, the system will phone home. So the system has a couple different options. The system will phone home and pull updates every 2 weeks. We push a release update to it. We also have, and it's very important to understand, O365 obviously is O365. But for Detect for Network, we have a air-gapped version, and we have customers that require it to be air-gapped for national security reasons, right? All of the machine learning and detections are on the platform. Nothing is backhauled back to Vectra to have a correlation run. No one is VPNing into this system to see if it's working right from a, oops, we missed these. So that kind of stuff is really critical to understand, because yes, it's metadata, and yes, it's non-identifying, but it's still your data, and depending on your policy, we can meet it with the solution.
Excellent. Let's got one more just came in here.
Looks like people are taking me up on that LinkedIn offer.
I'm going to. Go for it. Is there visibility into non-traditional devices that provide practical information for decision support?
So I'm going to read this how I want to read it, but I don't know if that's exactly how it's supposed to be read. We are watching the wire, right? So if there's a botnet attack coming from that IP camera in the hallway, we are going to see it. If it's coming from that heart monitor that you can't load a client onto, we'll see it, right? So we are going to see compromised devices. We're going to see them in their behavior on the network. So how am I going to see a compromised IP camera? Might be that IP camera has a small SSH shell to it, so I'll see a tunnel and tunnel to it, it might also have a port sweep going on that it's using to enumerate the network for reconnaissance. So this is the type of thing where I am able to watch, regardless of whether or not it's a laptop with a big, heavy EDR client, which I'm only talking to for host isolation, or a IP camera, or truthfully a Fitbit if it's got an IP address. So we're watching everything that talks IP, is the easiest way to say it. There are lots of other conversations to be had around OT devices and where OT becomes IT, or IP, sorry, and watching it at those places as well.
Super. Yep, IoT is an important thing to watch.
Yeah, it's critical, and anybody who needs to load a client is not going to be able to get there, and that's part of the problem. And even if all it is doing is reconnaissance, it might be doing reconnaissance so that somebody else can do something else somewhere else. And that's where that whole campaigns component that I had showed you earlier is, that we're going to see all that action happening in these campaigns.
Ever changing, that's for sure.
Yeah, there's also a lot of value. I talked to a really hardcore guy who presents at DEF CON on a regular basis, and he was like, the one thing that I hate about your system the most, right? Not from an attacker perspective, is that it doesn't react automatically. I can't tell whether or not you've caught me, or how you caught me, or which tool I was using that you caught me with.
Right. Because
yeah, I got 90% of the way in before somebody came and did it, and then they locked me out, or they honeypot me, or whatever. But that happened in arrears to the point that I can't tell which tool tripped the alarm, or which combination of tool tripped the alarm. And so the truth is that there's value in that as well, because the adjustment of technique is much more elongated.
Yeah, stealth mode is super important. Glad you mentioned. Wow.
Yeah, I just, that was the one that really threw me because I didn't even think about it. I'm thinking like, I want to react quickly. I want to get him off my network. And he's like, the fact that you don't throw me off the network right away means that it's really, really, if not impossibly difficult for me to adjust my tactics because I don't know which tactic it was or which combination it was.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Interesting feedback.
Yeah. So.
Okay, well, great. Not seeing any more questions come in, and I think we covered the gamut here. So thank you for the session, Geoff.
Sure.
Korrub.
Yep.
Korrub.
I've been called worse.
Yeah.
I always remind people of that.
Trying to honor you on the outside of the call there, but thank you so much. This is outstanding. Thanks to you and Vectra for sponsoring. It's been great. And to those that are watching, again, so sorry I butchered your name. It's so important. I'm trying here. Those watching, please share with your peers, and we're going to post this on our ISSA-LA YouTube channel. So look there for this session and for the other virtual meetings and the past security summits. And don't forget as well, the session is worth 1 CPE credit. So please make sure you follow up on that as appropriate. And next week, just a reminder to everybody, on the January 13th at the same time, 11:45, got the ISSA law enforcement panel with agencies such as the FBI and the US Secret Service. So again, Geoff, thank you so much. It was fantastic. Everybody stay safe, and look forward to connecting and staying connected.
All right. Mark, thank you for hosting.